The rescue happened on a forgettable Tuesday in the Epsilon sector, where cargo ships drifted through the void like mechanical whales. Evie's vessel, the Meridian, had suffered a catastrophic reactor leak 48 hours into what should have been a routine supply run to the outer colonies. The distress beacon pulsed weakly into the darkness, a dying heartbeat that most would ignore in this lawless stretch of space. Finn had been monitoring frequencies when he picked up the signal. The young communications officer aboard the human frigate Valiant had nearly dismissed it as debris interference, but something made him listen closer. Through the static he heard it, a voice human fading. "This is Evie Chen, cargo pilot. Oxygen failing. Coordinates 4478912. If anyone can hear this." Finn's fingers flew across his console. The coordinates placed her 12 hours away at maximum burn. Too far. By the time any human ship arrived, she'd be gone. But there was another ship closer. Much closer. The Karathi science vessel. Whisper of Stars had been conducting stellar surveys only 3 hours from Evie's position. The Karathi, tall crystalline beings whose bodies refracted light in prismatic cascades, had maintained strictly neutral relations with humanity. They observed, they studied, but they never intervened. Their philosophy held that each species must face its own trials without interference. Finn did something that would later be called either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid. He broadcast on the Karathi diplomatic channel, breaking at least 7 interstellar protocols. "Karathi vessel, this is the human ship Valiant. We have a dying pilot. You're the only ones who can reach her in time. Please, I'm begging you." The response came in perfectly synthesized human speech, cold as the void itself. "We do not involve ourselves in the affairs of other species. This is your people's matter." Finn's hands trembled. He thought of the voice on the recording. Evie's voice, terrified but controlled, accepting her death with a courage that made his chest ache. "Then let me tell you about her," Finn said, his voice cracking. "Her name is Evie Chen. She's 26 years old. She hauls medical supplies to colonies that can't afford regular transport. She does it at cost, sometimes at a loss. Last year, she delivered vaccines to a settlement during a plague outbreak when no one else would risk it. She saved 300 lives. 300 children who are alive right now because one human decided their lives mattered more than her profit." Silence. "She's dying alone in the dark, and I can't reach her. You can. And I know your people value knowledge above all else. So here's something to study. If you let her die when you could save her, you'll learn exactly what kind of species we are. Because we remember. Humanity never forgets." The channel went dead. Finn sat in the darkness of the comm room, tears streaming down his face, knowing he'd failed. 3 hours later, the Whisper of Stars docked with the Meridian. Karathi rescue specialists cut through the damaged hull and found Evie unconscious, her oxygen gauge reading 0. They resuscitated her with methods that would take human doctors decades to understand. They repaired her ship with technology that seemed like magic, and then they left, without a word, vanishing back into the stellar survey routes as if nothing had happened. When Evie woke in the medical bay, she listened to the recording of Finn's desperate plea. She wept for the boy she'd never met who'd fought for her life with nothing but words. The story spread like wildfire through human space, not because of the rescue itself, but because of what came after. Humanity remembered. Within a month, every Karathi vessel traveling through human territory found itself mysteriously upgraded. Fuel stations gave them priority docking. Colonies offered supplies at unprecedented discounts. Human ships began broadcasting navigational data to Karathi vessels, helping them avoid stellar hazards. The Karathi Council called it unnecessary. Humanity called it gratitude. 5 years later, a Karathi research station in the Beta Quadrant suffered a critical system failure. They were too far from their own rescue vessels, their distress call echoing unanswered through the void. 47 human ships changed course. They came from mining operations, from cargo runs, from military patrols. They burned through fuel reserves and pushed their engines past safety limits. The first ship arrived in 23 hours, a battered freighter whose captain transmitted a simple message. "You saved Evie Chen. We don't forget." By the time Karathi Rescue arrived, human engineers had already stabilized the station. They'd brought supplies, spare parts, and more help than was needed. And they refused payment. "We're returning the favor," the freighter captain said. With interest. The Karathi Council convened an emergency session. For a species that prided itself on understanding the universe, humanity had presented them with an equation they couldn't solve. How did one act of mercy, one deviation from policy, cascade into this? The answer came from the Karathi physician who had saved Evie's life. She had been studying human behavior for years, and she finally understood. They don't see individual transactions, she explained to the council, her crystalline form shimmering with realization. They see relationships. When we saved one human, we formed a bond with all of them. They operate as a collective consciousness of memory and obligation. One human's debt becomes the debt of their entire species. That's illogical, a council member argued. Most of them never met this Evie Chen. No, the physician agreed. But they all know her story, and they all know Finn's plea. In their collective memory, we became the species that answered when it mattered, so they answer for us. Forever. The council sat in stunned silence. Are you saying, the eldest finally spoke, that one act of compassion has bound their entire species to ours in perpetuity? Yes, the physician said. They call it humanity. We saved one of theirs, and now billions consider themselves in our debt. Not because they must, but because they choose to, because that's what humans do. In the Valiant's rec room, Finn and Evie sat together, watching a news feed about the Karathi station rescue. They'd become close friends in the years since the incident. Their bond forged in that desperate moment when a boy had refused to let a stranger die. Do you think they finally understand us? Evie asked. Finn smiled. Maybe, or maybe they're just realizing what we've always known. What's that? That the measure of a species isn't in their technology or their philosophy. It's in what they do when someone needs help. And humanity? He raised his glass in a toast. We never forget who stood with us in the dark. Across human space, billions raise their glasses too. Because that's what humans do. They remember, they honor, they return the favor, always end.